Next, we're going to refine our projectile actor a little bit here. We're going to give it more of its proper sprite-based appearance. So once we have the BP projectile open, we're going to look at its component layout. Here we have our component root. We have the sphere, which we were using as just a mesh representation of it in the game world, a visual representation. I'm going to delete that. We're going to keep our projectile component, but we are going to add a flipbook for an animated sprite. We'll just call this paper flipbook. And we're going to create, we don't have a source flipbook for the animated projectile yet. So we're going to go ahead and create that. So we'll close the projectile. And we're going to go back down to our source folder. We don't yet have a projectile imported from a actual sprite sheet. So let's go try that. We'll do import. And here we have this projectile right here. We'll import this. And again, we'll right click on the projectile sheet and we'll do sprite actions, apply paper 2D texture settings. Right click on this and save it. And now we're going to extract these as individual sprites. So we'll do that. And let's see if I zoom way in here, we can see here are the sprites, the animated frames we'll be using for our sprite projectile. We'll stick with auto sprite extract mode, and we'll just go into the naming template here and we'll remove sprite underscore and we'll just go with projectile and we'll extract. There's our sprite projectiles. We're going to, let's see, so let's organize this a little bit. We had our sprites folder in our player character. Let's make a new folder under sprites. We're just going to call objects for anything else we want animated that's not the player character. So we'll go here, we'll grab these sprites and we'll move them to objects. And now we're going to grab all of these. We'll just shift grab them all, right click and create flipbook. This will become an M projectile. All right, so back to our, let's see, our blueprint for the BP projectile. We open it up, and for our flipbook now, if we set the source flipbook to, let's do a search. Actually, it's right there, anim projectile. There it is, and we want to get rid of this kind of, we can see it's animating a little bit there as it flies, just by default. I'm going to get rid of this root so we don't see that. So let me see if I can change that so we don't see our root component. I usually just add a new scene root. And I call it root. And I drag it over here to make this the new root. Okay, there we go. Now we're not being obscured by that. So that's what our projectile should look like in the world. So now if we go to our player character blueprint, open it up, we see it's still spawning the BP projectile we had before. And if we go to play, we won't have a shooting animation yet, but we should have our actual projectile. There we have it. An actual sprite projectile to match the sprite appearance of our player character. So I'll close that. So we have part of our shooting behavior working here. We have launching the projectile. And obviously the point of shooting a projectile is to have it hit a target. So for that we're going to need some collision in the world to hit and some collision in the projectile to hit. So if we look at our game level here, you can see the spawn position is pointing this way. Okay, so we spawn in and the camera is facing this direction and our character is facing to the right off from this spawn point here. We're going to add a mesh into the world just for something to hit. Let's go to architecture. And we're just using 3D objects at this point because we haven't gotten to the sprite world building stage yet, but we will. So we'll do wall. See if I add this in, and I'll just rotate it 90 degrees. This way we can see the character will be facing it, moving along that plane there. So if I hit play, we see our wall in the world, and my character should hit it and not move beyond it. And if we shoot our projectile, though, we see it just, if we move it here, we can see it's actually going right through it. That's because there may be collision on the wall, but there's no collision on our projectile. So let's add some collision to our projectile. Let's see, we'll close up starter content, go back to the blueprints folder and find our projectile, open this up. Actually, to make this easy, I'm going to nest it in there. There we go. Okay, so we're going to add, here's our viewport. There's our projectile sprite. We're going to add some sphere collision to this. So I'm going to go add components and scroll down until I see collision, sphere collision, and add this. And we can see it right now, it's actually listed as attached to the paper flip book. And that's fine, we can leave it that way. So it's a little big, as you can see, the collision's much bigger than the visual representation. We want to try to match that. So we're going to just go to the sphere radius property here, and we're just going to drag this down until it's closer to the size of the sprite, which is the visual representation. I'll just go to the front view here to get a little better look at this. I'll drag that down till, let's say, about that size. Then we can just move it. And we'll just align the sphere there, and let's just go ahead and change the sphere radius to 4. That should be fine. And now that we have the collision set up on the projectile, we can begin considering what events we want to happen when the collision of this actor collides with other things in the game world.